Hello, I'm Graham Dale. What do the Hungarian billionaire George Soros and the Irish billionaire Dennis O'Brien have in common? Well, apart from the obvious, the answer is that they are supporting claims being made for reparations with regard to the Atlantic slave trade. These claims are being made by the CARICOM group of countries, which is the Caribbean community consisting of about 15 countries, and the African Union. Excuse me. On the 25th of March, Ghana will be taking up its seat at the United Nations and will be presenting a resolution, which I understand will include the statement that the transatlantic slave trade is the greatest crime against humanity in history, which is clearly a point worthy of debate. The promoters will be obviously seeking the support of the United Nations, and who knows, the claim for reparations may well end up at the International Court of Justice. The amount involved in the claim is truly eye-watering. The figure I've heard is up to $131 trillion. It's interesting to note that the claim relates only to the transatlantic slave trade, completely ignoring the East Africa slave trade, which was actually about 50% larger in terms of the number of slaves involved than the transatlantic trade. And I can only assume that it's being ignored because the transatlantic trade was carried on by West European countries, whereas the East African trade wasn't. In any event, the claim for reparations should be strenuously resisted and, in fact, dismissed, simply because there is no basis under international law on which a claim can be made. For the period involved, which is the 15th to the 19th centuries, slavery was not illegal under international law, and therefore there is no basis for a claim. The closest slavery came to being illegal under international law was at the Conference of Vienna in 1815, where, due to the pressure being applied by Britain's Foreign Secretary of the time, Lord Castlereagh, 8 countries, Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, Austria, Sweden, Russia, and Prussia, signed a declaration seeking to outlaw the African slave trade. But unfortunately, the declaration was non-binding and didn't have a timeline. And it was left to the individual countries concerned to pass whatever domestic legislation was necessary to make slavery illegal. Britain, of course, did proceed to make slavery illegal. In fact, the Slavery Act of 1807 did make slavery illegal in Britain. And in 1833, it became illegal throughout the entire British Empire. And of course, through the West Africa Squadron, Britain sought to interdict ships carrying slaves to the Americas. And in fact, over the period 1807 to 1867, they rescued and released over 150,000 African captives. This operation cost Britain dearly in terms of both treasure and blood. At one stage, the squadron accounted for 50% of the entire naval budget and 2% of the then GDP. And of course, it did cost the lives of 1,600 British sailors in its enforcement. It's interesting to note that the African countries who were involved in the slave trade didn't support the declaration against slavery. And the reason, of course, they didn't was because it was a very lucrative trade. that they'd actually plied for thousands of years. I mean, they supplied the Romans, for example, 1,500 years ago with slaves, and the Arabs probably over the same sort of period of time. So they were really quite keen to keep the trade going, which of course they did. And it's interesting also to note that even today in Africa, slavery still exists. Hereditary slavery is still carried on in Mali and Mauritania. Now, what are the African Union doing about that? Probably nothing. And similarly, they're probably doing nothing about the Sokoto Caliphate in northern Nigeria, which at one time had 4 million slaves, which was the same number held in America immediately prior to the Civil War. What are the African Union doing about reparations for those enslaved by the Sokoto Caliphate? Again, I think probably nothing. So there's no legal basis upon which the reparations claim can be mounted. So what the claimants are going to be relying on is applying 21st century morals and human rights to the period several hundred years before, which is clearly nonsense. You cannot retrospectively apply the morals and standards of today to a situation which persisted several hundred years ago. And also, of course, the slaves involved, the real victims, have long since died. There is no basis really upon which the so-called descendants can make any claim on their behalf. And of course, the irony is that we've got the African Union being a part of this claim, when they, in fact, the countries involved were active participants in the whole slave trade for the whole of the period concerned. And if you like, the victims, which I suppose were those transported to, let's say, the Caribbean, they're no longer alive, and so perhaps their descendants should include the African Union as part of their claim, because really they should be having a go at the African Union as much as they're having a go at the Western European countries involved in the transport of the slaves. Britain has a particular issue because we always seem to be in the firing line. And we have an issue because writers, academics like Eric Williams, who became the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago in 1962, has claimed that the wealth of Britain, that the Industrial Revolution and the subsequent wealth of Britain was dependent upon the benefits of the slave trade. This has been reiterated time and again by other authors, but has been comprehensively debunked by a number of leading and reputable economists and historians. It basically makes no sense whatsoever. It's interesting to note that between 2010 and 2025, Britain gave away £250 billion in overseas development aid, much of which going to our former colonies. So in a sense, we're already making reparations, but we're doing it from our own free will, and we're not being pressured, forced, and bullied into doing it, which we should certainly resist. Thank you.